My parents took my money for a luxury trip while I lay immobilized after surgery, so I cut them off, and what I did next crushed their perfect world. I, a 34-year-old male, have been working as a lineman for the power company since I was 22. Decent pay, solid benefits, but the job is dangerous as hell. Not like those cushy office jobs where the biggest threat is a paper cut or carpal tunnel. I'm talking 80-foot climbs up holes that sway in the wind, handling lines carrying enough voltage to cook you from the inside out, all while dealing with whatever beast Mother Nature decides to throw at you that day. Last winter, I spent 16 hours straight restoring power during an ice storm. My fingers were so numb I could barely feel the tools. I had a buddy lose 3 fingers when a line unexpectedly went hot. Another guy fell and shattered his pelvis. But whatever, it paid the bills. Not just mine, but apparently everyone else's too. Growing up, I was always the other son in our house. My younger brother Jared, a 31-year-old male, was the golden child who could do no wrong. Dude played football in high school, got decent grades, and had this natural charm that made my parents practically worship the ground he walked on. He wasn't even that great at football, second-string quarterback who mostly warmed the bench, but my parents acted like they were raising the next Tom Brady. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, hard-working kid who never quite measured up. I actually had better grades than Jared, worked part-time at a hardware store throughout high school, and even won a state competition for drafting. But somehow, that stuff never registered on my parents' radar. Every conversation at dinner was about Jared's practice, Jared's games, Jared's college prospects. I'd sit there chewing my food slowly, practically invisible. Dad's a retired factory supervisor who spent most of my childhood telling me I wasn't applying myself enough. Never mind that I applied myself plenty, just not to things he considered important. Mom's an elementary school secretary who somehow always had time to go to all of Jared's games, but was too busy when I had stuff going on. When I had my drafting competition, she had a migraine. When I graduated with honors, she had to cover for someone at work. Not that they'd ever admit to playing favorites, but actions speak louder than words, right? After high school, Jared got a partial scholarship to state, blew through it partying and dropped out after 2 years. I went straight to trade school, got my certifications, and started working my ass off climbing poles and fixing lines. And somehow, I still wasn't the success story in the family. Dad would introduce Jared as my son who went to state and me as just Mike. Like my existence was an afterthought, a footnote to the family legacy. When Jared couldn't find a job that matched his potential, anything requiring actual work or starting at the bottom, guess who started helping him with rent? The first time it was supposed to be a one-time thing. Just until I get on my feet, bro, he said with that same charming smile that got him out of trouble our whole lives. But one time became every month and soon it was just expected. And when mom and dad's roof started leaking or when their car needed a new transmission, yep, good old reliable Mike, the family wallet. Like an idiot, I even set up a joint account where they could access funds for emergencies. It had started after Dad called at 11 p.m. on a Sunday because their furnace died in January. Instead of making them wait for me to transfer money or drive over with cash, I thought the joint account would make things easier, show them I wanted to help. What a joke. I was still just the family punchline, the dependable disappointment, nothing more. Every family gathering was the same. Jared would show up in new clothes, talking about some business idea that was definitely going to take off this time, while mom and dad nodded along like he was pitching on Shark Tank. Then they turned to me with those patronizing smiles. "How's work, Mike? Still climbing those poles?" Like I was some kind of trained monkey performing a trick, not a guy with a skilled trade keeping the freaking power grid running. Last Thanksgiving, I overheard my mom talking to my aunt in the kitchen. "It's really a blessing that Mike's job pays so well. Jared needs time to find his path, and your brother and I aren't getting any younger." Not one word about being proud of me or grateful for my help. Just glad my paycheck could support my deadbeat brother while he found himself well into his 30s. I remember driving home that night wondering why I kept putting up with this crap. That's just how it was for years. Jared would screw up, I'd bail him out. Parents needed something, I'd provide it. While they constantly talked about how stressed Jared was, trying to find his purpose at 31, still living in an apartment I was partly paying for, no one ever asked about the toll of climbing utility poles in thunderstorms, or working 70-hour weeks during outage season. They never asked about the time I got caught in a sudden electrical arc and was thrown 10 feet, my safety harness barely catching me. They never asked about the constant back pain from hauling equipment up and down poles all day, or the scars on my hands from years of manual labor. The worst part? I'd convinced myself this was normal, that this was what family meant. Carrying everyone else's weight while they took you for granted. I had buddies at work who'd comment on how often my family called asking for money, but I just shrug it off. That's just how it is, I'd say, like some kind of mantra. Then about 2 months ago, I had a serious accident at work. I was up on a pole during a windstorm when a branch came loose and knocked me off balance. I remember the sickening feeling of suddenly being weightless, my hand grasping at nothing but air. I fell about 25 feet before my secondary safety line caught me. But the damage was done. I broke 2 vertebrae, fractured my pelvis, and messed up my right knee. I remember lying on the ground, unable to move. Rain hitting my face while my CO workers radioed for an ambulance. Doctor said I was lucky not to be paralyzed, but I'd need major back surgery and at least 3 to 4 months of recovery before I could even think about going back to work. The surgeon didn't sugarcoat it. This isn't just a matter of pain management, Mr. Matthews. Your spine needs to be stabilized with metal rods, and then you'll need intensive physical therapy to regain mobility. You will not be able to care for yourself properly for at least the first month. With my savings and workers' comp, I'd be okay financially, but I'd need actual help during recovery. The doctors were clear. I'd need assistance getting around, cooking, and basic stuff for at least the first month. I couldn't drive, couldn't bend, couldn't lift anything over 5 pounds. Basically, couldn't do anything that might put stress on my newly rebuilt spine. I called my parents from the hospital the day after the accident. Mom answered on the 4th ring sounding distracted. When I told her what happened, there was a pause. "Oh, that's terrible, honey. We'll try to check in on you when we can." Try when they can. Like visiting their critically injured son was an errand they'd squeeze in between grocery shopping and getting the oil changed. Dad got on the phone and immediately asked if the company was giving me paid leave. More concerned about my financial status than my actual health. He made some comments about how I should look into desk jobs since pole climbing is a young man's game anyway. Neither of them offered to actually help during my recovery. Then I called Jared thinking maybe my brother would step up. His response? "Damn, that sucks, bro. Hey, actually, since you're going to be home anyway, can I crash at your place for a couple of weeks? My landlord's being a jerk about rent again." I just hung up. Didn't even dignify that with a response. Meanwhile, my buddy Derek, who works with me on the line crew, was the one who drove me home from the hospital and helped me get settled. Not a blood relative, just a CEO worker who'd known me for 6 years. But he took 2 days off work to set up my house for recovery. He even stocked my fridge and set up a makeshift bedroom on the 1st floor so I wouldn't have to tackle the stairs. He moved my TV down, set up a mini fridge within reach of my bed, and even rigged up this pulley system with rope so I could grab stuff without bending. My crew supervisor, Pete, stopped by a few times that first week to check on me, bring food, and just hang out for a bit so I wouldn't lose my mind from boredom. He brought over his PlayStation and set it up, saying I'd need something to keep me busy. Pete wasn't exactly the warm and fuzzy type. He was a former Marine who rarely smiled, but there he was, showing me how to adjust the bed just right to minimize back strain. 2 days before my surgery, my cousin Travis called. We'd always been close as kids, though we didn't see each other much these days. He lived about an hour away and worked as a project manager for a construction company. "Hey, man, just checking in. Do you need anything before you go under the knife?" We talked for a while about the surgery, the recovery process, all that fun stuff. Then during the call, he mentioned he'd been at my parents' place the day before, helping them with some backyard project. "Weird thing," he said, sounding uncomfortable. "Your folks and Jared were planning some fishing trip to Lake Murray. Cabin rental, boat, the works. Must be costing a few grand at least." I went quiet, my brain not quite processing what I was hearing. Travis continued, "When I asked if they were postponing because of your surgery, your mom just laughed and said, 'Let him recover on his own. We're not wasting a perfectly good vacation because Mike decided to fall off a pole.' That hit me like a second fall. After everything I'd done for them, they weren't even going to be around for my surgery and they were using my money from that shared account to fund their little getaway. Money that was supposed to be for actual emergencies." I checked the joint account on my phone while Travis was still talking. Sure enough, there was a $3,200 pending charge to Lake Murray Outfitters. They'd also withdrawn another $2,500 in cash over the last 3 days. What kind of emergency required $1,000 cash withdrawals? After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling for about an hour, something inside me finally breaking. All these years of being the reliable one, the provider, the safety net, and I wasn't even worth postponing a fishing trip for. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They didn't love me. Maybe they never had. I was just a resource to them, a convenience. That's when I decided no more. I thanked Travis for being straight with me. The minute we hung up, I logged into my bank account on my phone. Thank God for mobile banking when you can barely move. I transferred every single dollar out of the joint account, all $8,700 of it. Didn't leave a freaking cent. I also canceled the credit card I'd given them for emergencies, the one they'd maxed out twice before, and I'd stupidly paid off. The online system asked if I wanted to provide a reason for the cancellation. I typed fraud risk and hit submit. Then I called Derek. Hey, man, I need a huge favor. Can you come over tonight and help me set up some cameras? Being a fellow paranoid lineman who'd had his tools stolen from a job site before, he didn't even ask questions. He just showed up with a couple of wireless security cams we could monitor from my phone. We installed one facing the front door, one in the living room, and another covering the makeshift bedroom I was using. Derek also changed the code on my garage door opener and added a chain lock to the front door. Just in case, he said, giving me a knowing look. He'd met my family at company picnics. He knew the score. I had the surgery the next morning, a 4-hour procedure where they basically rebuilt part of my spine with titanium hardware that would set off metal detectors for the rest of my life. Travis had driven me to the hospital at 5 a.m., waited through the whole thing, and was there when I woke up groggy and confused in the recovery room. The morning after my surgery, which went well, thankfully, though I was groggy as hell and in serious pain, my phone exploded with notifications. It started around 9 a.m. Apparently, the time when they discovered the account was empty. Missed calls from everyone. Messages pouring in nonstop. Mom? Michael, pick up the phone right now. Dad, what happened to the account? Call immediately. Mom again, did you empty the emergency fund? Jared, dude, WTF is your problem? I needed that money. I ignored everything. Just lay in my medical bed high on pain meds, but also feeling peaceful. For once, I wasn't scrambling to fix their problems. Travis had driven me to surgery and back, helped me get settled with my meds and everything. My neighbor Susan, a retired nurse I'd helped with yard work a few times, checked in on me that morning. She was this no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd worked in the ER for 40 years. She took one look at my incision, pronounced it healing nicely, and proceeded to rearrange my pillows in a way that instantly relieved pressure on my lower back. The people who actually gave a damn were showing up. When I finally answered the phone around noon, my mom went straight to attack mode. Michael James, what on earth did you do? Nice to hear from you too, Mom. How's the fishing trip going? I said, voice still raspy from the anesthesia tube. Don't you dare be smart with me. The account, where's the money? I laughed, which hurt my incision like hell. Oh, that? I shut it down. There was silence. Then her voice got all high and mighty. You had no right to do that. That money was for emergencies. For emergencies like my back surgery or like your fishing trip to Lake Murray? She sputtered. How did you? That's completely different. Your father and I have been under so much stress with Jared's situation. We needed this break. You're right, because having a son who almost got paralyzed isn't stressful at all. Silly me. That's not fair, she snapped. We were going to visit you after our trip. Wow, how generous. Maybe bring me back a cheap keychain from the bait shop. The conversation continued in this vein until I finally hung up. The pain meds were wearing off and I needed another dose. But weirdly, I felt better than I had in years. Like, some massive weight had finally been lifted off my spine. One the surgeons couldn't remove. About an hour later, I got a notification from one of the security cameras Derek had set up. Someone was at my front door. I checked the feed on my phone and saw my dad and Jared standing there looking pissed. I was laid up in bed, couldn't even get to the door if I wanted to, but they didn't know that. They banged on the door for a good 5 minutes, getting louder and more aggressive. Dad's face getting redder by the minute, Jared pacing like a caged animal. Then I watched as my dad pulled out a key, the emergency key I'd given them years ago just in case. My heart started racing as they let themselves in. Oh, Mike, where the hell are you? My dad's voice boomed through the house. I stayed silent watching them move through my living room on the camera feed. Jared was already going through my stuff, opening drawers. Maybe he's got cash stashed somewhere. The absolute balls on these people, breaking into my house, going through my belongings, looking for cash, all while I was recovering from major surgery. And they saw nothing wrong with this picture. They made their way toward my makeshift bedroom on the first floor, and I clicked the record button on the app. My dad burst in face red with anger when he saw me in bed. I was wearing a back brace over my hospital gown and 4-pole next to the bed, pill bottles and wound care supplies laid out on the bedside table, the picture of someone seriously injured. Where's the goddamn money, Mike? He was practically spitting. You broke into my house while I'm recovering from major surgery. That's your move? I kept my voice calm despite my heart hammering. Don't change the subject. We need that money for our trip. Everything's already booked. I laughed, which sent lightning bolts of pain down my spine. Oh, yeah, the fishing trip. More important than your son's health. Jared stepped forward. Quit being so dramatic. It's just back surgery. Not like you're dying. The casualness with which he dismissed a procedure that had literally put titanium rods in my spine was almost impressive. In Jared's world, if it wasn't happening to him, it wasn't really happening. My dad's face got even redder. That was our emergency fund. Strange definition of emergency. And I don't remember either of you ever putting a dime into it. My dad got all tense, fists clenched. You better fix this right now. I stared right back at him. Or what? You'll hit a man who just had spinal surgery? That seemed to snap him back to reality a bit, but Jared was still amped up. Just transfer the money back. It's not like you need it laid up here. Get out of my house, both of you now. Dad jabbed his finger at me. This isn't over. You're right, I said. And believe me, this is just the beginning. They finally left, slamming the door so hard my windows rattled. The second they were gone, I called Derek, who came right over to change my locks. I also called the police to report the break-in, showing them the video footage from the security cams. Officer Daniels, the cop who took the report, shook his head as he watched the video. Let me get this straight. You just had major surgery and your family broke in to demand money? He looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't process this level of screwed-up family dynamics. Pretty much, I said. And they were planning a fishing trip instead of helping you recover? He was making notes but kept glancing up at me with this look of disbelief. Yep, using my money too. He sighed heavily. I've been a cop for 12 years and family disputes still surprise me. I'll file this report. You might want to consider a restraining order. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. It was Officer Martinez from the county sheriff's department. My freaking parents had actually filed a theft complaint against me. I laughed so hard I nearly popped my stitches. Sir, we have a report that you've stolen funds from a family account, she began. I explained that the account was created by me, funded solely by me, and closed by me. I also mentioned I had video evidence of my father and brother breaking into my home while I was recovering from surgery. There was a long pause. They broke in while you're on bed rest? Yes, ma'am. I just filed a report with city police. Check with Officer Daniels. I have the video right here. She cleared her throat. I see. Well, regarding the account issue, without proof of their contributions, there's no case to pursue. Thank you, officer. The calls and texts kept coming for days. At first, they were just angry, calling me selfish, ungrateful, a disappointment. Jared sent these rambling voice messages about how I was destroying the family over a little fishing trip. Dad kept calling and immediately hanging up when I answered, like some teenager throwing a tantrum. I saved every message, every text. Part of me was still in disbelief that this was my actual family. Another part was finally seeing clearly what had been right in front of me for decades. The messages got increasingly desperate as their departure date for Lake Murray approached. They'd already put down non-refundable deposits. Apparently, funny how they suddenly couldn't afford things when it was only their money at stake. Then, when they realized I wasn't caving, they switched tactics. Mom started with the guilt trip, saying she was devastated that I turned my back on family and that she never raised such a heartless son. She conveniently forgot about the decades of taking me for granted, or the fact that they couldn't even postpone a vacation for my major surgery. Travis called to warn me they were reaching out to extended family, telling everyone I'd stolen their retirement fund and abandoned them when they needed support. The worst part? Some relatives actually bought this. My Aunt Carol even called to lecture me about honoring thy father and mother. I just hung up. But here's the real kicker. They were still planning their fishing trip. After all the drama, the police report breaking into my house, they were determined to go on that vacation just without the luxury cabin they'd planned to rent with my money. I found out later they downgraded to a cheap motel and a day rental fishing boat instead of the week-long guided package they'd been eyeing. The thought of Jared and my dad crammed into some musty motel room instead of living it up in a lakeside cabin gave me more satisfaction than I'd care to admit. And during all this, Pete and the guys from my crew took turns checking in on me. Derek's wife, Tia, brought over homemade meals. Susan from next door helped me change my bandages when I couldn't reach. These people, who owed me nothing, showed more care than my own blood. It was Susan who first noticed something was off with my mail. "Didn't you say you were expecting disability paperwork?" she asked one afternoon. "I haven't seen the mailman bring anything like that." I checked online and sure enough, several important documents had been marked as delivered, but never made it to me. Someone was intercepting my mail. It didn't take a genius to figure out who. Then things got seriously messed up. 3 days after surgery, I got an alert from my credit monitoring service about suspicious activity. Someone had tried to open a loan in my name at a local credit union. Then I got a call from my bank's fraud department. Someone was attempting to access my accounts by claiming to be me, saying I was incapacitated after an accident and they had power of attorney. I immediately knew who it was. Years ago, I'd added my dad as my emergency contact on some paperwork. They must have taken that information and tried to use it to gain access to my finances. This wasn't just being entitled anymore. This was straight-up identity theft. The bank representative sounded genuinely concerned. "Sir, the person knew a lot of your personal details, social security number, mother's maiden name, even the name of your first pet. We only became suspicious when they couldn't answer questions about your recent transactions. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. My own family was willing to commit felony fraud rather than accept that the gravy train had ended. They'd rather risk criminal charges than get real jobs or live within their means. I called the bank's fraud department and locked down all my accounts. I filed reports with both the bank and the police. Then I contacted the credit bureaus to put a freeze on my credit. But I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I called Travis. Remember that attorney friend of yours? The one who does family law? 2 days later, I had a virtual meeting with Sarah, a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases, but also handled cases of financial exploitation between family members. I shared everything. Bank records showing years of one-sided loans, the security footage of them breaking in, the attempted identity theft, all of it. She didn't react with shock or surprise, just methodically took notes, occasionally asking for clarification on dates or amounts. "This is actually quite serious," she said, not sugarcoating anything. "Breaking into your home while you're recovering from surgery, attempting to access your accounts fraudulently. These are criminal matters, not just family drama." She helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter, filed for a temporary restraining order, and started building a case for financial restitution. "They've taken advantage of you for years," she said. "We might be able to recover some of what you've lost." I showed her my spreadsheet. Yes, I'd kept a spreadsheet of every loan I'd given them over the past decade. It totaled just over $63,000, not counting the joint account money they burned through. Her eyebrows shot up when she saw the figure. "You've been very generous," she said carefully. "I've been a complete idiot," I corrected her. She didn't argue. The icing on the cake? She suggested we send the legal documents to their house via courier, time to arrive the morning they were supposed to leave for their fishing trip. "They want to go fishing instead of helping you recover?" she said with a slight smile. "Let's give them something else to worry about." While laid up in bed, I also made some calls to the power company. Turned out there was an opening for a training coordinator, less pay than line work, but a desk job I could handle even with my back issues. My supervisor had been suggesting I apply for years, saying I had a knack for teaching the newbies. With his recommendation, I had a good shot. And for the first time in forever, I was focusing on my life, my future, not carrying everyone else's problems. And it felt amazing even through the surgical pain. Pete came by that evening to help me practice some physical therapy exercises. "Heard you're applying for the training gig," he said casually. "Yeah, figured it was time for a change." He nodded. "Been telling you for years you'd be good at it. About time you listened at a wake-up call, I guess. Your family." He wasn't one to beat around the bush. "Yeah, turns out they've been using me all this time," he snorted. "No shit. We've all been watching it happen for years. Just waiting for you to see it too." That hit me hard. Was I really the last one to realize how messed up my family dynamic was? Had everyone else seen what I'd been blind to? "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. Pete shrugged. "Would you have listened? Some things you gotta figure out on your own." He was right. I probably wouldn't have listened, would have defended them, made excuses, kept right on being the family ATM. Sometimes rock bottom is exactly where you need to hit. 3 days later, while I was sitting in my backyard doing my prescribed physical therapy exercises, my phone blew up with notifications. "Mom, what have you done?" "Dad, you ungrateful piece of call off your lawyer now." "Jared, dude, restraining order? Are you freaking psycho?" I scrolled through them calmly while sipping the protein shake Susan had made me. Travis had texted too. "Just heard from my cousin Amy who works at the bait shop. Your folks showed up to pick up their fishing gear and had a complete meltdown when they got served the papers. Your dad threw his phone and broke it, LOL. I could have blocked them all, but honestly, I was enjoying watching them panic for once. It was like some cosmic scale had finally balanced. For years, they'd caused me stress and anxiety, made me feel like I was never doing enough, never giving enough. Now they were getting a taste of what that felt like. About an hour later, my doorbell rang. The security camera showed my mom standing there alone, looking like she'd been crying. Not the dramatic attention-seeking tears she usually used to manipulate me, but actual red-faced crying. Derek had helped me set up a speaker system so I could talk to people at the door without getting up. "You need to turn around and leave," I said through the speaker. "The restraining order is very clear." "Michael, please." Her voice cracked. "We're your parents. How could you do this to us? The same way you left for a fishing trip instead of helping your son after major surgery. The same way you tried to steal my identity when I cut you off. That was your father's idea. I told him not to save it, Mom. The papers outline everything. Years of financial abuse, the break-in, the attempted fraud. You've got 30 seconds before I call the police for violating the restraining order." She switched tactics immediately, going from tears to anger. "Fine. Jared was right. You've always been selfish. But you'll regret this, Michael. When your back gives out again and you're all alone with nobody to help you, I cut the speaker off mid-sentence. Didn't need to hear that crap anymore. The lawyer had warned me they'd try emotional manipulation. They'll tell you you'll die alone, that you're ungrateful, that you're cruel. These are standard tactics used by abusers, she'd explained. 2 weeks later, I got a certified letter. My mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer and needed money for treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. There were medical documents attached and everything. I almost felt bad until I called the hospital listed on the paperwork and discovered the documents were forged. She wasn't even a patient there. The hospital administrator I spoke with was horrified. "Sir, I can confirm we have no record of your mother as a patient and this is not our letterhead. Someone has created fraudulent medical documents. Can I ask you to put that in writing? My lawyer might need it." The desperation continued as the months passed. Dad lost his job supposedly. Jared's car broke down. The roof was leaking. Each crisis was carefully crafted to pull up my heartstrings and reach for my wallet. I saved every message, added them to the legal file, and moved on with my life. I got that training coordinator position with the power company. The job was different, less physically demanding but more mentally challenging. I was teaching new recruits how to stay alive while working with deadly voltage. The responsibility felt good, like I was finally using my experience for something meaningful beyond just surviving another day on the poles. My back was healing well, though I'd never climb poles again. And honestly, I was okay with that. The doctor was impressed with my progress, said my recovery was ahead of schedule. Turns out, when you're not carrying the weight of 3 extra adults, your body can actually focus on healing itself. 6 months after cutting them off, the karma hit. Travis called me up, laughing so hard he could barely talk. "Bro, you're not going to believe what happened. Your dad and Jared got scammed out of $14,000. "What? How?" I was sitting at my desk at the training center, reviewing safety protocols for the next day's class. They fell for one of those cryptocurrency investment schemes. Some dude promised to triple their money in a month if they invested in his special mining operation. They took out a freaking loan to do it. I nearly choked on my coffee. "You're kidding me. $14,000? They couldn't spare a day to help me after surgery, but had $14 to hand over to some random scammer? That's not even the best part," Travis continued. "Guess who they're trying to sue? The bank. They're saying the bank should have stopped them from making such an obviously fraudulent transaction. The irony was too perfect. After trying to raid my accounts when I cut them off, they'd willingly handed over a small fortune to a complete stranger because they thought they were too smart to get scammed. And now they were playing victim, trying to blame someone else for their own stupidity just like they always did." That night as I was browsing my email, I saw a message from Jared. The subject line, "Please man, we're desperate." The email was predictable. They were drowning in debt, couldn't make the loan payments, dad's credit was ruined, mom was having stress-related health issues, and somehow this was all portrayed as my problem to fix. The last line was the kicker. "I know we've had our differences, but we're family. Family helps family in tough times. We need $20,000 to get out of this hole. We can pay you back $500 a month, I swear." I clicked reply and typed just 4 words, "Karma's a bitch." Then I blocked his email. My physical therapist, Maria, had told me it would take about a year for my new normal to settle in. She was right about more than just my back. A year after the accident, my life looked completely different. I'd moved to a single-story house closer to the training center, eliminating my commute and making daily life easier on my back. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it felt good to have that part of my life back. The following weekend, I hosted a barbecue at my place. Derek and Tia were there with their kids. Travis brought his new girlfriend. Susan from next door came with her famous potato salad. Even my boss, Pete, stopped by with a 6-pack of soda. Looking around at these people, none related to me by blood but all who showed up when it mattered, I realized I hadn't lost family by cutting off my parents and brother. I just finally found my real one. As we sat around the table, I couldn't help but notice how different this felt from family gatherings growing up. There was no tension, no constant feeling that I wasn't measuring up. Just good people enjoying each other's company. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up, I found an envelope Susan had left on the counter. Inside was a card that simply said, "Family is who shows up. Proud of you for figuring that out." It hit me right in the chest. I sometimes wonder if my parents and Jared ever think about what they lost, not the money, but me. Do they ever regret how they treated the one person who always showed up for them? Probably not. People who use others rarely have that kind of self-awareness. As for me, I don't regret cutting them off. My only regret is not doing it sooner.